Hi, it's been a really long time since I made a video, about a year. Um, so I haven't uploaded anything, and I actually stopped reading physical books for about 6 months, and I focus mainly on manga. I might do a separate video on that later on. But in the meantime, I thought I'd do just a quick wrap up since it is mid-year. So I thought I would talk about everything that I read from February up until June. It might be a long video, but thankfully I didn't read that much yet. So first things first, we'll go through what I first started in February. So what kicked me off back into physical reading or non-manga reading is actually a non-fictional book series by Dolores Cannon. And if you're unaware of who she is a hypnotist that does metaphysics stuff. So I read The Convoluted Universe Book 1 and 2, Between Life and Death, Conversations with the Spirit, and Three Ways of Volunteer and the New Earth. And they were very fascinating reads. You have to have an open mind. I actually listened to them through audiobooks, so they were really great audiobook reads. Basically, Dolores Cannon is a hypnotist. In these books, she's documenting certain sessions with different clients, and all are kind of related to certain topics. Some are on the topics of like past lives, and then we touch upon like things like Atlantis and aliens and all sorts of outlandish things, but it's very intriguing. I got really, really hooked into it. After that, I decided to go to a Brandon Sanderson book because I felt like, he was releasing so many books this year. So I wanted to jump on that bandwagon. So I started with a book that I've had on my shelf for a really long time, and it's Skyward. Skyward was good. I felt like there was a lot of familiar tropes and characters. I'm noticing that with a lot of Sanderson books. He has a lot of the same type of characters and protagonists, and that's fine. I really did enjoy it. I loved the ship. I can't for the life of me remember the name of the ship. I did enjoy it. But I don't know, for whatever reason, I'm just not in any rush to continue on, although I do actually own the second book. What is it called? Starsight. I own the second book, Starsight, so I will happily read that eventually. So the next book that I moved on to was Rhapsody, Child of Blood by Elizabeth Hayden. And I have been meaning to reread this book for years. I read them 20 years ago. I know. So I've been meaning to reread this book for forever because it was actually one of my favorite books of all time. And I was afraid if I reread it, I would not like it and it would make me sad. Thankfully, I reread it and I still loved it. And if you're unfamiliar with it, it is a classic-ish fantasy from like the early 2000s, late 90s. And it's about a woman who has magical ability to change somebody's name by using a words. Like, words are very important. Music is very important in this book. But what sets this book apart is the fact that she has these two basically monstrous men in her life. Not in her life, but she meets them, and basically they softly kidnap her. I don't want to say kidnap her, but sort of, yeah. And then they form this amazing found family, and the magic and the world building is phenomenal, like top tier. Like, I don't know, it's just up there with like Robin Hobb and Sanderson, just big world. And it is a bit of a romance. Thankfully, the first book it doesn't really focus on the romance too much. It mostly focuses on the trio, and I loved it. It was 5 stars. I loved it so much. It was everything I wanted. It's such a good series, and it's an ongoing series, and I'm going to slowly make my way through it. The next book I read was Children of Memory by Adrian Tchaikovsky. This is the 3rd book in the Children of Time trilogy. If you don't know, Children of Time is one of my all-time favorite books. I love that book. Like, I actually became obsessed with spiders after that. And like now in our house, I don't let anybody kill spiders because I find they're so fascinating. The second book, what was it called? The second book is Children of Ruin. I did not like Children of Ruin. It was such a step down. I understand where he was going with it, but it lost that special something that Children of Time had. So I wasn't any rush, but I wanted to complete the series. So I read Children of Memory, and unfortunately, it did not live up to the expectation. So after that, I read Before They Were Hanged by Joe Abercrombie. Last year or the year before, I read The Blade itself and wasn't the biggest fan. I appreciate the writing. I can totally respect and understand why everybody loves Joe Abercrombie. He is very interesting writing. I even gave the audiobook to my husband so he could listen to it, and he really liked it. And I understand why everybody loves Glocta, but I just found that I wasn't very immersed into the story. I'm happy to say Before They're Hanged was so much, in my opinion, better. It actually had a story. You got to know the characters a little bit more. There was more action, although there's action in The Blade itself, but I mean there's more plot-driven action. And I really enjoyed it. The next book I read was Tress of the Emerald Sea. I love this book so much. It was so whimsical. I got the physical copy, and the art is just phenomenal. I love the take of the Princess Bride, the princess having, or Buttercup having, agency. I love that. I gave it 5 stars, but honestly, looking back, I think I probably would have gave it 4.5 because it was just, it went on too long. It did a lot of rambling, and although I loved Sanderson's world and, the take on it and the seafaring adventure, I found that the romance, it was horrible. He cannot write romance for, I don't know, he just can't. And it was painful. Not painful, it was just okay, it's here. I had no feelings towards it. I didn't care if it really worked out for them in the end. But I did like the characters, and I loved the world, and everything about it was just phenomenal, minus the romance. Also, I have noticed that Sanderson's main female characters are all very similar. Very similar. And maybe they're inspired by his wife, I have a feeling. Maybe, I don't know. But regardless, I had a blast of a time, and I definitely recommend it if anybody's a Sanderson fan. Even if you're not, I think it's still a good standalone book. The next book I read was The Grace of Kings. So I finally read The Grace of Kings. It's been on my TBR for over a year. Grace of King by Ken Liu. This book was beautiful. That's the only way I can say it. It's just beautiful. His writing is beautiful. It's so in-depth. It's immersive. And the character growth was just phenomenal. I was so invested in these characters, and it broke my heart because it was very realistic, because life doesn't work out the way we all want it to. And it was good. It was so good. But I'm not in a rush to continue on, and I don't know why. Maybe I need a little push because it was really dense, and I think I'm a little burnt out from dense fantasies at the moment. So please give me a push to continue on because I really do really love it. So the next book I read was The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet. I believe this is the first in a bunch of standalone books by Becky Chambers, and the series is called The Wayfarers, and they're all standalone but kind of connected. I did enjoy this book. I gave it 4 stars. So basically this is almost like a slice of life space opera, and it kind of reminded me of Guardians of the Galaxy, but with a lot less action, and kind of like Star Trek. where we have this motley crew of humans and other species. They're on the ship and they have to go to this very secluded planet. And there's a lot of political intrigue. There's queer representation. There's interspecies representation. It's just a very slice of life kind of following this crew, and they're very delightful. I did find that it went on a bit too long. I think this book is over 400 pages, and for a slice of life, I feel like that's way too long, and I started losing my interest, so I only gave it 4 stars. But overall, if you like space operas, if you like slice of life, I suggest if you just need a break from a long series, give it a chance. So the next book I read after that is Prophecy, Child of Earth. This is the second book in the Symphony of Ages by Elizabeth Hayden. This is the sequel to Rhapsody. Oh gosh, this book disappointed me so much. Oh my God. Again, the world phenomenal, the characters phenomenal, and we're continuing on with our stories. But my God, the romance. Oh my God. 200 pages. Cut that 200 pages out, and this would have been a 5-star read. Unfortunately, there was 200 pages of legit romance. And maybe I just wasn't in the mood for romance at the time. Because I remember when I read it the first time, I thought it was a great book. So maybe I was just not in the mood for romance. So unfortunately, I gave this book 3 stars. I am still invested in the series. I still want to continue. But yeah, man, it was not a fun experience. Also, this book is huge. It's like 800 pages. So I'm going to continue probably this summer on to Destiny, the third in the series. The next book I read was Gardens of the Moon by Steven Erikson. I finally made the dive. Into Malazan. And I don't think it's for me, guys. I tried. You know what? I think, how do I say this? I can see why everybody loves this series so much. I can see it. I understand it. I think his writing is phenomenal. I love his vision. I think his character work is fantastic. But for me, it took a lot of the enjoyment out of not knowing what the hell was going on. And it's not like I'm I'm basic and couldn't figure it out. It was just, I couldn't dig my claws into the story. And then when I finally was getting stable, it took me out and I'm like, what the hell's going on? I do want to continue. Well, I have continued, so hang on. But I don't know. Maybe I need to just really pump myself up for reading Steven Erikson. So the next book I read after that was Of Blood and Fire by Ryan Cahill. Is it Cahill or Cahill? Everybody says it differently. And it's from the Bound and the Broken series. And this is a independent self-pub book fantasy that's really popular right now. And like I said, I think I'm a little worn out from the classic fantasy dense reads right now, because although this book was fun, it was just so familiar. It was so familiar. It was like Star Wars and Aragon, which Aragon is basically Star Wars, and I can see some Wheel of Time in there. It was fine. But if you really like that classic dragon boy and his dragon trope, in a kind of like a dark, dingy world, and I think there's a prophecy or chosen one and a prophecy. If you love that stuff, you will definitely like this book because it hits all those marks. But for me, I guess maybe I've been reading those books for 20 years and I need fresh. So I will continue on with the series because I'm genuinely curious to see where it goes. The next book I read after that is The Girl and the Stars, book 1 of Ice by Mark Wahlberg. No, Mark Lawrence. And I have a love-hate relationship with Mark Lawrence. One, I love his writing. I love his perspective, his unique fantasy. But I really didn't like Red Sister. I found that maybe that's because I don't like Assassin School kind of books. I know. But Red Sister just didn't work for me. But I'm so happy to say that The Girl and the Stars, it was just a perfect blend of science fiction, fantasy, and sci-fantasy, which is like my favorite subgenre. The coldness, the ice was like literally a character. And I would love to say a synopsis of what this is, but it's about a girl, and I can't remember her name. I'll put it up here. Who is basically has these abilities, which she should not. These people are not supposed to have these abilities, but she has these special abilities. And she knows if all of the clans find out that she has these abilities, they'll basically kill her. But one thing leads to another, and somehow she ends up underground, and she discovers like these like lost boy like kids that have like, there's generations of kids that have been thrown underground for being flawed. And it starts off small, and it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And it's a short read. It's a phenomenal read. And I'm going to definitely continue on with the series going forward because I love his writing. His writing is just, it's just beautiful. The next book I read was The next book I read is Alloy of Law, and this is Mistborn Second Era by Brandon Sanderson. I have a very unpopular opinion of not liking Mistborn very much. I respect and appreciate what it has done for the fantasy community. I think it's a fantastic idea. I love the worlds. It's one of those things where just like I can't pinpoint what I didn't really like about it. Even though it's an unpopular opinion, I decided to think that maybe that second era is probably more my cup of tea. And it kind of reminded me of like Sherlock Holmes in Mistborn. But actually, you know what it is? It's a lot like the Sherlock Holmes, the Guy Ritchie film. It's probably identical to that, but with Mistborn elements to it. I'm going to continue on with the series because I know that the last book in it is just, everybody's just given it 5 stars across the board. Even people who don't even like second are like 5 stars. So I will continue on. I do like the humor though. A lot of people don't like the humor. I love Wayne. Is it Wayne or Wax? I don't know. I can't remember which. But the funny one. I think he's hilarious. I love him. So I'm definitely going to continue on with that. But again, I only gave this book 3 stars, 3.5 stars for just, the fact that I didn't really thoroughly enjoy it. So the next book I read after that is Ashes the Sun by Diego Wexler. And this is the first book in the Burning Blade and Silver Eye trilogy. And oh my God, guys. Oh, I love this book. Well, I made the mistake of listening to the audiobook, and the audio narrator, I didn't like how they narrated certain characters. I felt like they kind of made it a little cheesy. But this is like my ideal of just like turn my brain off, sit down and read something that will entertain me, kind of like a popcorn blockbuster movie book. It is Star Wars. It is Final Fantasy. It is Arcane. And they basically have lightsabers, and that's cool. So basically, it's about these 2 siblings in a world where it's very reminiscent to the first trilogy of the first Star Wars trilogy, where you have like the Order, like the Jedi Order, but it's called the Order, and they kind of are all powerful, rule over everybody, very reminiscent to how the Jedis were before the downfall, but it's not quite the same because there's these things called ghouls, another species that are kind of involved, and as the story goes on, everything's not so black and white. I have to say that this story, although I only gave the first one 4.5 stars, the world is fantastic. The action is great. The character work is really good. And the relationships are just cute. Like, they're sweet and they're realistic, and they talk about their feelings, and not like, talk about their feelings, but they talk about the relationship, and it's really good. So I give that 4.5 stars. And I definitely, if for fans who love that kind of stuff, it's a good time. The next book I read was The Fall, and it is a prequel novella to The Bound and the Broken. God. Anyway, by Ryan Cahill. So I listened to this on audiobook, and it was a step up from the first one. I did enjoy it, and it has me more curious to see where the story goes. But I did listen to this on audiobook, and I don't think I absorbed as much as I should have. So I may have to re-listen to it to really get going before I can go on to the next book. I gave this book, I think I gave it about 4 stars. But again, now I can't really remember what it was about. I think it was, again, a setup to like the fall of a big empire. The next book I read was Iron Gold by Pierce Brown. This is actually a reread, and I'm very glad that I reread it, because I literally remembered nothing about this book when I read it. I must have read it in like a binge in like 24 hours and didn't absorb any of it. So I'm very glad that I reread it. This is a year I'm rereading, apparently. I enjoyed the story. I think I loved the new characters that were introduced. I really do. I love the new characters. The only thing is, I don't like what they did with Darrow's like character. Oh. Anyway, I am very intrigued where it's going, but I'm also very scared because I haven't read Dark Age, for the reason that everybody keeps saying it's dark. It's dark. It's so dark. It's bleak. I don't know if I'm ready for the darkness. So I have been putting off reading Dark Age, even though I pre-ordered Lightbringer. So I got to get to it. I gave this book 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. But yeah, some of the stuff, it was hard. It was a hard book. The next book I read is a indie author, again, another indie book, and it's called The Forbidden, The Ancestor Saga by Laurie Holmes. And I really enjoyed this. I don't know, I just picked it up on a whim. Again, like previous, it's a prehistory, early humans, where there's almost like Neanderthals and humans, and there's a lot of metaphysics in it. It's about a woman who is pregnant, like massively pregnant, with the first of an intermingled species. They don't use the word human, but she's the smaller creature, forest-dwelling humanoid, and her spouse was this big, like, Neanderthal kind of person. And her tribe gets attacked and slaughtered, and basically she's on the run. She meets another species, another species, and together they kind of form a bond and try to survive together. I thought it was really good. I enjoy anything prehistorical, and I enjoy anything metaphysical. So it was definitely a great read. The next book I read was Wistful Ascending, The Hybrid Helix by J.C.M. Barn. And this is another space opera, kind of like superhero indie series. And oh my God, this was a blast. Like, I just loved it. The main character was just awesome, hilarious, sweet. And it was a wonderful book. So the story takes place on a space station, kind of like Star Trek, how they have the space stations. And our main character is like a hybrid human / like Hyperion, I think it is. And it's basically like a superpowered being that went around and had babies with a bunch of other races. So he has like these superpowers. He could fly. He's strong. He's like pretty much like Superman, except without the laser eyes. He's on the space station because he was in a war and he's just trying to escape that, and he wants to live a simple life. So basically he becomes a tow driver. So he goes out into space and tows in spaceships to the space station. I really enjoyed it. It was sweet. There was a grown-up romance in it that I loved. But it got a bit repetitive and episodic. Like he would wake up and then start his day and speak to people, and then shit would hit the fan and he would have to deal with it. And then at the end, when everything was done and he was covered in gore, he would have a conversation with somebody, a meaningful conversation, and then start the day all over again. So it was good, but it just got a bit repetitive for me. I give this book 4 stars, only because I think that the idea was not exactly fresh, but I liked the take on it. The next book I read was Lies of Locke Lamora, Gentlemen Bastards, Book 1 by Scott Lynch. I guess this is the year that I'm reading all these like beloved books, and I love this book. I can totally see why everybody loves this book. Like Locke is just, oh, he's just awesome. Yeah, and there's a heist, and there's a bromance, and it's a fun time. I can't really say anything else than that because it'll give away the plot, but it's a really fun time and I really enjoyed it. And I can totally see where the hype is. The next book I read was Soulsmith by Will White, and this is the second in the Cradle series. And this is a progression lit RPG kind of, but this is basically very Dragon Ball Z. That's all I can say. Or Dragon Ball. Dragon Ball, like the original when he was like a little kid, going into Dragon Ball Z. Like, it's just, it's so Dragon Ball Z. The story follows Lyndon, who was born without the ability to have abilities, if I can say that right. The first book, it talks about how he really wants to be able to do these things and become a soulsmith, but he just doesn't have the ability. So then he basically swindles and cheats his way through things and finds these like objects to give him abilities, pretty much like a game. He goes on a quest to find a thing and up his level. So this is just a continuation. I honestly didn't really like this book very much. Not that I didn't like it. It was just meh. It was basically, it seemed like a half of a bigger story. It introduced a new character, a couple new characters, and I think that's just all it does, is just continuing on, and I can't really say anything else. We'll continue on with that. What did I give this book? I gave it 3 stars. Maybe 3.5. I can't remember. It wasn't that great. The next book I read was Hall of Smoke, The Four Pillars by M.H. Long. Norse-inspired, kind of very reminiscent to Xena, the warrior princess, in my opinion. I did like this book. So basically, our main character, Hessa, is from this clan that worship a war goddess. And she's a priestess, so that means that she has special abilities gifted by this war goddess. And her tribe, again, gets slaughtered. It seems like an ongoing thing. And she is basically on the run, but she's not on the run. She's like off for revenge. Her goddess gave her a mission to hunt down and kill this man. So this is her story. Again, it was very episodic. I did enjoy it, but what I loved was the relationship between the gods and the humans. The gods were very much like flawed and like, it just, if you've watched Xena, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Like they were people. They weren't like almighty, all powerful. They were just people with really big abilities, and they were just super flawed and selfish. And I just love that relationship between all of them. Again, this is part of a series, but it is also kind of like a standalone. I don't think I'm going to continue on with the series, to be honest, because I have so many other series that I want to read. But I did pre-order her newest book, which is more a seafaring book, and I love seafaring books, so I'm definitely excited to read. But I did like her writing, and I think she's a fantastic writer. But again, just not really my cup of tea. Okay, so the next book I read was Blackflame, and this is the third book in the Cradle series by Will White. Again, I like this book a lot better than Soulsmith. It kind of starts going on, taking on more of a story and forming, and the ideas are getting bigger, and the world is expanding, which I like. I like when it starts small and then the world just expands out. Maybe I'm just simple, so I just enjoy that. I had a good time, but I really feel like I just need to listen to these on audiobook, so I just have to wait until I have more credits for Audible because I can't find it anywhere else. So that's that. I think I gave it 3.5 stars. So I gave it a little bit more than Soulsmith. The next book I read was Blood of the Chosen, and this is the second of Bladeborn and Silver Eye by Django Wexler. And oh my God, I love this book so much. Oh, it's such a good book. It was so fun. And I read this physically. I got rid of the audiobook and I had such a blast with it. And I can't wait to continue, but I'm also so scared because I was like literally reading and biting my nail, and oh, it was so fun. And I love these characters, and I had a really, really good time. So that was actually the last book that I read. So I DNF'd 2 books and put down 2 books. So I'll talk about those real quick. The Fourth Wing, that everybody seems to be talking about, I read probably about 20%, and I decided to put down. It was not what I was hoping that the book would be, and I know that's a little unfair to say, but it was just it was okay. The story was entertaining, and I can understand it. It seems like a really fun time, but for me, it just didn't work. I have a lot of problems reading YA. I have trouble reading YA books. I'm in a point in my life where I just can't read from a teenage point of view anymore. It's whatever. So I DNF that. I don't think I'll pick it up. I mean, I own the copy of it. Maybe I'll keep it and continue on if the book series continues. We'll see. The next book I DNF'd was Rules of Redemption, and it is the Firebird Chronicles by T.A. White. I actually don't know if this is self-pub or not. I don't think it is. I listened to this on audiobook. I think I got about 60% in, and I just didn't care. I just didn't care. I wasn't invested. It was like Buffy the Vampire Slayer in space. Like, I just didn't care. And the character was just so stereotypical, like badass character. I'm so bad. I just didn't care. And then the romance, I don't even know if there was, like, it's supposed to be romance, and it was just, it seemed forced. And I did like her sidekick, this like little AI sidekick. I thought he was adorable. I only continued on because he was in it. Yeah, it's just not my cup of tea. I think that if you like those type of romance kind of things, like what's her name? I can't remember the name of the series. I'll put it up here. You'll definitely like this book. But again, it's not my genre. I don't really like that. So I DNF'd it. So I soft DNF'd 2 books. The first book is Demon in White by Christopher Rocchio. And this is the 3rd book in the Sun Eaters series. Again, I'm trying to love this series because I totally see what people see. I think that the world is phenomenal. I think that the character work is interesting, but I just don't mesh well with his writing style. And unfortunately, that's something that's just not going to change. I was listening to the audiobooks, and maybe I just wasn't in the mood for it. So I'm going to continue on once I'm feeling more in the mood for that. So obviously, I'm going to continue because I have them all. The second one I soft enough is Dead House Gates by Stephen Erickson. I can't say his name. Stephen Erickson. Same reason, just wasn't feeling it. And I was enjoying parts of it. Like some of the stories, I really, like some of the sub-stories, I really was like really into. And then the other ones, I just really wasn't. And I was just zoning out whenever I read it, and I think I'm going to continue an audiobook. Maybe that will help me get more into it. So that was my long-winded wrap-up. If you made it all the way through, thank you so much, and I hope you all have a really great day. Bye.